lot of people remember the 90s as a sort of renaissance of television animation, especially for Warner Brothers. It was during this time that they'd bust out some of their most iconic animated series ever, like Animaniacs, Pinky and the Brain, and even Freakazoid. With these shows all the rage at the time, it was pretty inevitable that some of that Warner magic was going to bleed on into video games. From the veins of this 90s Warner animation bled some inspiration for a game called Jersey Devil, a platformer game for PlayStation created by our good friends Behaviour Interactive. They were only known as Behaviour for just 2 years before changing their studio's name again. Between 2000 and 2010, they were known as Artificial Mind and Movement, or A2M for short. You might know these guys for making Scalar, a game that I've reviewed in the past, amongst many other projects, few of which were original and many of which were licensed. They changed the name back to Behaviour in 2010 to avoid association with a rather crude phrase that has the same acronym. I know I've mentioned this on the show before, but it is one of my favorite pieces of trivia ever. They changed their name because A2M stood for ass to mouth. You can't make this stuff up, it's too good. But even before they were Behaviour Entertainment, they were called Megatoon Studios originally, and under that name, they started work on a little-known platformer called Jersey Devil. It was later that they merged into Behaviour, just before the game released in North America and Japan. As a result, the game ended up launching with the Behaviour logo on the package instead of the Megatoon logo, but even still, you can actually find remains of the old company logo in some of the game's textures. And for some reason in the PAL version, which actually predates the other regions by about 6 months, the game company was credited as Malofilm Interactive instead of either Megatoon or Behaviour. I don't know the story behind this, couldn't find any info, but if you're wondering why your copy says Malofilm instead of Behaviour, it's a region thing, that's why. Now, the Jersey Devil, as many of you probably know, is an American myth from the early 1900s. People claim to have spotted a wyvern-like creature in southern New Jersey, and it's since become an urban legend like the Sasquatch or Loch Ness Monster, and here they made a game based on the little dude, which I think was a pretty rad idea. It's one of those games that not a lot of people really own, but everybody played it on a demo disc at some point in time, you know? When it came out, it wasn't received very well, and sales overall were pretty modest, and as such, it quickly fell into obscurity. And as you guys know, it's my job to dig it back up out of obscurity and give it a shot. So, why don't we see what this game was all about? Of course, being inspired by Warner Animation, you gotta kick the game off with an animated intro sequence, and it does look the part. I mean, the 240p resolution and all the compression doesn't really do the image quality any favors, but it does look decent. And the soundtrack, wow, it is spot on. Listen to that. So this little pumpkin henchman dude captures a baby Jersey Devil and brings it to his master, Dr. Narf. Yeah, that's an obvious reference to, from Pinky and the Brain. This guy does all these weird experiments on vegetables, transforming them into these monsters that'll wreak havoc on Jersey. Dr. Narf then notices that one of his scalpels are a little bit banged up, so he's like, well, I gotta go to the store and get a new one, so he makes the stupid decision of leaving the Jersey Devil home alone, who then destroys his lab with a bottle of nitro. But was it a bottle of, Nitro Rad? There, I said it. It's been said. Now every comment doesn't need to be the exact same joke. Thank you. After escaping the clutches of Dr. Narf, we then cut to many years later. Narf's monsters are now kidnapping the townsfolk while a now adult Jersey Devil comes to lay the smack down and save the day. I really don't know what's with this one shot here. Why is he a 3D render in this one shot? Everything else is hand-drawn. This looks really out of place. Interestingly enough, though, that reminds me that the Japanese version of the game actually had a fully 3D intro, which was much lighter on story. It's mostly just a montage of the town being terrorized before the Jersey Devil lands in town. We then land in the hub world and take control. Okay, so as far as the controls go, we don't really have a whole lot more than the standard jump and punch attack. The punching in this game, it's kinda dinky, the animation doesn't move you forward or anything. Usually in a game where you punch something, you'll take a step forward so it gets some reach, you know? But in this game, it doesn't do that. Strangely enough, though, it is a perfectly reliable attack, so I guess the hitbox does extend out a little bit further than it looks like, though the animation I think really could have used a little bit more oomph. Gotta give me a satisfying punch. I mean, what's the point of punching dudes if punching dudes ain't satisfying, right? I found myself more so relying on the spin attack, which is executed by pushing the punch button while airborne. It lasts a little bit longer and has a much wider area of effect, you know, being 360 degrees instead of just being in front of you. You can also duck with the circle button, which is absolutely pointless. Like, any point in the game you'd think you can use it, it doesn't work, except this one area here. Like, this one area in the entire game you actually do have to duck, like, for some reason. I do not know what's up with that. And lastly, we've got a glide move. The Jersey Devil will open up his evil whittle bat wings and will descend slowly. There is a bit of a pause starting it up though, so you can't just push the button and go. You'll have to hang in the air a little bit until the animation is done before you can actually move forward. It just doesn't have much flow to it, and I always feel like I've been cheated out of some extra distance. Like, I totally could have gone a little bit further if it weren't for this clunky pause. This is also one of those weird PS1 games that has support for the analog stick, but it doesn't actually have full 360 degree movement, so whether you're using the stick or the pad, you're only going to get 8-direction movement. Though the stick does at least recognize the difference between a small push and a full push, which will change your walking speed, so the stick does end up feeling a little bit better. Despite the limited directions, I never had a problem maneuvering myself onto each platform. The platform size feels just right, and the camera is pretty good at maintaining a comfortable angle to make things doable. When the game first came out, the camera was one of the things that were most heavily criticized, which is really interesting because it's really not that bad a camera. I never found myself disoriented or unable to get a good view of what I'm trying to do. However, the manual rotation of the camera is incredibly slow, and that did strike an impatient nerve with me sometimes. Alright, so from the hub world of Jersey, you can enter one of 5 larger hub worlds. Each one of these hides 2 levels that you can then access by collecting 5 letters of NARF. I actually really like the way this game is structured. You start with an open hub world level to explore, and then you get a linear stage following it. While the main stages may be linear, there will be a lot of times you'll have to look around for 5 more letters of NARF. These can be found laying around, hidden in boxes, or sometimes by defeating enemies. Man, I don't know what it is with this game, but sometimes completely random enemies will just take way too many hits. It's not even very many of them, just like a handful of them here and there that have way too much health. And what sucks so much about it is you have to take the time to knock them out because you know that they might have one of those NARF letters. And sometimes they do have one of those NARF letters. So you have to do it. At least the settings are really fun. Like, the first level's a museum, having you fight these pterodactyls on display that just decided to come to life for some reason. This one What's all the noise in here, boys? Am I interrupting something? Like, what is this? A bunch of hip-hop alligators just chilling out some tunes? This is sick, dude. There is so much lovable cartoon malarkey in this game. Like, this one level has you exploring the tomb of a dead basketball player, and the boss fight has you playing against them. That's so good. The goal of any given level is simply to reach the end and then fight the boss. The boss fights range from par to not that great. I mean, like, some of them are cool in concept, like a T-Rex skeleton on display coming to life to attack you, but every boss pretty much is the same. You wait for their attacking animation to finish, and then you hit them, and then you do that over and over until you win. Some of these fights can be really clunky too, like it's just way too hard to get a proper hit on them without getting knocked around like a punching bag. These would probably be really hard boss fights if the fight actually reset when you died, but for some reason it doesn't. Like, you died, you come back, and they're still got as much health as they had when you died. So it's like you just throw yourself at them over and over until you win. Some of these boss fights will require figuring out some sort of strategy, like throwing TNT boxes at this octopus, or playing hop on pop with this very large lady, but none of these boss fights really spoke to me in any way. They're just kinda there and whatever. Dying in this game really isn't much of a consequence in general, actually, because checkpoints are frequent and they hand out extra lives like candy. There's so many spots in this game with tons and tons of extra lives just out in the open, ripe for the picking. You will never find yourself low on lives, that much is certain. It's really funny because the only cheat code in this game that I could find is a 99 lives code. Yeah, like I'd ever need that. Having way too many lives at any given time is actually pretty handy because you're you're probably going to die a lot. I did, at least in the later stages, and not really because the game is difficult, but because this game can be pretty clunky. The hit detection on platforms just isn't good sometimes, and the death zones for pits are sometimes placed in really dumb spots. I mean, like, look right here! I died here? That doesn't make any sense! It's just a result of a bad death zone placement, and this really only is a problem on this one slide stage, but man, that is bad. At least the slide levels are kind of fun. They definitely don't hold a candle to the slides of other games from the time, like Mario 64 or Rayman 2. Those slides were sick. Here they're just kinda whatever, you know, there's no crazy jumps or super great game feel or anything. It's just a simple ride down to the bottom, dodging some obstacles. It's not bad. But back to dying and stuff, yeah, it seems like to me that they were probably having a very hard time adjusting the game's difficulty. It is an easy game, but you will die a lot from the clunky game design, so I'm guessing to remedy this, instead of polishing up the game, they just made 1-ups extremely common, and I mean, like, that does kind of fix it. You don't lose much progress for dying, and I never felt frustrated because I had plenty of lives. But of course, as hilarious as that is, it is a fairly lousy way of dealing with it. I also think the presentation could be a bit better, honestly. I mean, they're going for that iconic 90s Warner style, right? So they've got these neat little death cutscenes, a different one for each type of death. One for falling in a pit, one for landing in water, and one for losing all of your health. However, I just don't really think it manages to faithfully capture that style. There's not enough whip to it, not enough wackiness to it. Instead of Jersey Devil's body gently plopping into the ground, I would have had him plummet right through, leaving a hole in the shape of his body. Warner Brothers cartoons are all about speed and weight. I mean, like, that's why they have anvils as a running gag in those shows. And the Jersey Devil, it feels too much like a floating piece of paper and not enough like an anvil. I hate to say this because goddamn this game to hell, but Bubsy 3D did this a little bit better. I still can't believe I beat that frickin' game. Good lord. Man, I don't even know what is up with the parallax scrolling in this game. You hardly rotate the camera and those skyboxes are flying, dude. Like, where are you going? Slow down. I think they're moving twice as fast as they're supposed to. Like, the whole point of parallax scrolling is that the background scrolls at a slower rate than the foreground because it's far away, right? But here I think it's going faster. It makes no sense. And like, I know that parallax scrolling is primarily a thing just in 2D games, but I've never seen a skybox in a 3D game do this before, so like, I don't know what else to call it. You know what? I don't even think that is a skybox. I think that's just a 2D texture on the background layer that's just set to scroll. They just did it really badly. I do at least like the environments a lot though. Like I said, the settings are real fun. We've got a museum, a toxic dump, the haunted mansion, that was one of my favorites, and this shipyard's a lot of fun too. I don't really know what it is about shipyard and harbor levels that I love so much. Maybe it reminds me a little bit of home, who knows. They've got a couple of good environment gags too, like the idea of somebody ordering a non-violent monkey, like specifically, that's pretty funny. They're not as plentiful as in something like Gex or A Hat in Time, but it's appreciated nonetheless. Seriously though, like, real talk here, if you guys ever make a platformer, please scribble dumb stuff on the walls of your levels. I cannot get enough of that. I actually really hated the boxes level in the shipyard. It was way too hard to navigate. Everything looked exactly the same, and it took me like half an hour to figure out how the hell to get through it. The worst part in the entire game though was this bit leading up to the dockyard, the sewer level. You can't touch the water or you'll die, so you have to jump on these barrels and turtles to make your way through. Sounds easy enough, yeah, but the turtles are all moving on a rail, and these rails go real far, so you're gonna spend a lot of time waiting for these turtles to come back and forth so you can jump on them. Not to mention, jumping on small moving platforms, well, that's a recipe for getting wet, let me tell you right now. This level drags on so long. Just this one sewer segment, which mind you is only a fourth of the level as a whole, it took me 20 minutes to get through, and I was ready to pull my hair out of my damn head knowing that I had to go through it all again if I wanted to access the second shipyard level. But luckily, once you clear it for the first time, every succeeding playthrough of it is abridged into a 20-second segment. Thank you, Behaviour! Mwah! The only other level that I found really frustrating was this haunted house level. There's a bunch of floorboards that'll fall without warning, causing a lot of unfair deaths. The level itself, though, was fun enough to make up for it. That's pretty much how I feel about the entire game, honestly. Like, this is not a well-made game. There's going to be a lot of frustrating moments that have you dying when it's really not your fault, but despite that, I did find myself having a lot of fun. Like, the levels are fun, the settings are interesting, and there's a decent enough level of exploration that made me feel like a kid in a candy store. Or a Jersey Devil in a museum. One of my favorite goof-ups in this game is the HUD. When you hide it, you can still see it barely on screen. Like, they didn't even get it all the way out of frame. How do you mess something like that up? Look right there, I see you. I see you. I see you, and I see you. Like, you couldn't get this off, you couldn't get that off screen. Really? It also never goes away by itself. It's stuck on a manual toggle, which is a little bit annoying. Never did I ever appreciate the HUD coming down when you take damage automatically until I played this game. Like, not knowing what your health is at right when you get hit is like, it's like having an itch you can't scratch. Well, you can scratch it, you just gotta hit a button. That's so weird though, like usually it comes down when you need to see it, but like, I've never played a game that's done that. That's just so weird. You're probably wondering what all this junk on screen even means. Well, obviously, that right there is your lives. There's the health bar. Interesting that it's a bar. Like, usually platformers get more creative with something like this. Pie slices for Pac-Man, flower petals for Yoshi, paw prints for Gex, but here we just have a stale purple bar. It's just like whatever, like, come on. And there we have our pumpkins. They're pretty much like just coins. If you get 100, you get an extra life. I don't know why they went with pumpkins though. Maybe because of the semi-Halloween theme, or maybe to fit the bill with Dr. Narf experimenting on vegetables. Yeah, I'd say between those two, that's probably it. And then down here on the bottom of the screen, we've got a little green box and a letter P. These actually coincide with one another, neither of which are mandatory for completing the game, but they are necessary for getting the best ending. When playing any given level, there's going to be two things you'll want to keep an eye out for. The first is 2 hostages that you'll have to free, and the second is a number of nitro boxes. Unlike Crash, these things aren't going to hurt you. Instead, you're going to want to crack open every last one. Busting up every nitro box in a level is going to give the Jersey Devil enough nitro to make another nitro potion at the end of the stage. Using it, he will then increase his power level by 1. As your power level increases, you'll get strong enough to move objects in the hub worlds that'll hide bonus levels. Keep an eye out for any structures or doors that have the letter P with a number. These are all just quick slide levels that'll have 2 more hostages to rescue. So, you need the nitro boxes to get the power, you need power to unlock the bonus levels, and you need to play the bonus levels to free all the hostages. If you manage to free every hostage in the game and then beat the game, you'll get this nice little extended ending. It's nothing like super major or really worth getting, but on the other side, getting all the hostages is not like an overwhelmingly difficult thing to do. Like, I know 100%ing a lot of these old school platformers is just a pain in the ass, but this one's not too bad, so it is a nice little bonus. So, the game overall, it's fine, you know. It was received very poorly at release, but like I always say, a bad game can age well just as easily as a good game can age poorly. Compared to everything else out of the time, this was a clunky and buggy mess, but looking back at it all on its own as this bizarre and clunky adorable little game, I see something that I rather like. It doesn't really grasp that Warner magic as firmly as it wanted to, but it's still a charming and dumb little game that I had a pretty good time with. There's a lot of unfair deaths, and the measures they took to remedy that is downright lazy, but there's something about the level design, the settings, the characters, and that lovely, lovely orchestral score that made this game a joy to play. If Mario's the grandfather of platformers, and Gex is the annoying uncle that you still love because he's your favorite uncle, then Jersey Devil is the stupid younger cousin, you know, the one that likes bad horror movies, but he's nice so you like hanging out with him anyway. For a first attempt at making a platformer, they really could have done worse. I mean, they'd go on to make Scalar years and years later, which is a much better game than this, but I still had a lot of fun with Jersey Devil. It's not really a good game, but there's so much about it that I just love. That soundtrack especially, man, if there's anything they did land on the money with, it's that. I don't really know how to pronounce his name. I'll try. Gilles Leville. I don't know. Hey, I tried. This dude did some amazing work. If anybody on this project did capture that Warner Brothers magic, it is this guy. He even came back to do the soundtracks of 2 of Behavior's next games, Bugs Bunny Lost in Time and Bugs and Taz Time Busters. Dang, dude. You went from making Warner-inspired soundtracks to actual Warner soundtracks. That is awesome. So yeah, if you want to give it a shot, you can definitely do worse. I mean, like, you can easily do better as well, but as far as B-grade platformers go, it gets my stamp of approval. It may be a little bit rough around the edges, actually that's probably putting it pretty lightly. It may not be very well made whatsoever, but I still had a lot of fun with it, you know? It's not particularly cheap online. It'll run you like 30 to 50 bucks on eBay, so that's probably a little bit more than most of you guys are going to want to spend on like a crappy PS1 platformer game. So if you just want to give it a shot, you're probably best off emulating it unless you have some sort of personal attachment to it, or you're like me and you need to buy every platformer for whatever reason. I don't know why. I got tons of them. Let's do some more. See you guys next time.